The success we saw Caleb Williams have against the Buffalo Bills on Sunday was no fluke. It was a direct result of all the struggles he had earlier at training camp.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. On the show today, I want to look at how the Bears built up to that starting offensive performance against the Buffalo Bills and how this was really the payoff for all of the negative stuff we had heard about the offense throughout the early days of Bears training camp. I also want to hear from Ben Johnson about whether or not these Bears starters might actually play in the third preseason game against the Kansas City Chiefs and kind of read through. He's not committing to it either way, but he gave us some hints as to what direction he might be leaning there. And same is true at the left tackle position, where they still haven't formally named a starter yet, but we've been talking on this podcast about the direction it's going to go, and it sounds like they're even closer now to kind of finalizing that spot. We'll see if they actually make a formal announcement about that or not, but it feels like that's pretty much settled, and this Bills game was kind of the last big hurrah for them to see what these offensive tackles had in store. But we saw what Caleb Williams had in store and how successful he was against the Bills, and to me, this is very clearly the fruits of the training camp labor. And I think it's a full circle moment for everyone who's followed the team closely, that for all of the negative reports and struggles that we heard about, the ups and downs of training camp practices, this is the result of that. This is the growth that happens as a result of those struggles. And it feels like it's the payoff of the long game the Bears have been playing with Caleb Williams' development in Ben Johnson this whole time. Because we knew it throughout this process, and we tried to preach patience for it on this podcast, that, hey, they're installing a new offense. They're building a new offense kind of on the fly. They're throwing everything they can at Caleb Williams to kind of see what sticks and what doesn't. They want to try a little bit of everything, see what works well for him, what works well for the receivers, what works well for the offensive line. And then once you sort of try, and it's sort of a trial and error process of like going through everything they can go through, then once they're done installing, then you sort of refine it and whittle it down and say, okay, let's get rid of the stuff we didn't like, keep the stuff we did like, and make the 2025 Chicago Bears offense out of that. And so it shouldn't be a surprise then that now that we've gone through that process, that installation process, that initiation process, that getting to know the offense kind of process, that, once you stop throwing everything at them, and you slow it down and you narrow it down and say, hey, focus on these 15 plays for the preseason game, that maybe, just maybe, they, can go out there and execute at a super, super high level. Because Ben Johnson talked about how, for every young quarterback, there's always going to be ups and downs. It's going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But he thought like this past week in the lead up to the Bills game, were like 3 or 4 straight practices of Caleb Williams stacking really good days where he didn't have any of the bad days in there, and he was really sort of building off of one another. And that's kind of exactly how the plan should be going then at this point. Like in some ways we shouldn't be surprised. It's nice to see, and like it's important that we recognize that it's a good thing. We shouldn't say it's not important, but it totally makes sense and adds up and seems like intentionally how the Bears built this up for Caleb Williams. And I thought Caleb himself did a really good job of explaining this in his post-game press conference, of sort of like why he feels like maybe things are starting to click a little bit more now than they were earlier in the training camp process.
Yeah, I think it's just we're done with installs. So I think it's just being able to go back over everything, kind of, skim over it, kind of, some of the small details that were written down throughout the, 12, 13 installs we had. Been able to see some of those small, details and things like that I wrote down or that we talked about, and being able to go back over those and just, provide more clarity and also just a little bit more confidence with, the installs and things like that we've gone over so far. And I think it's, I think now it's the steps of, taking the next steps of making sure I can handle everything when we get up to the line. And a part of it was also, Ben and I had a conversation about, I think we've kind of talked about it, in interviews now, is the procedures and, all of that of, getting up to the line, having everybody all on the same page. And, I think we felt like we were at a good point of that, and it was now time to show results.
So if we kind of put this timeline together a little bit, right? Bears started training camp on I think the first open practice was Friday, July 25th. And we know Ben Johnson and them, they had 12 days of install, right? When Caleb talks about, well, now we're done with installing, right? Install is like, hey, we're introducing new stuff and we're trying it for maybe not always the first time. Maybe he's run something similar to it before, but like the Ben Johnson version, hey, we're really putting this on your plate for the first time. So that's like 12 practices worth of like, hey, here's some new and different stuff. It's 12 practices of not doing the same things a second time very much. There's always some crossover, right? But so it's not like it's 100% brand new every day, but it's like every day, mostly brand new stuff. And keep in mind, they don't practice literally 7 days in a row. There are off days in there. So if they started on the 25th, if you count like 12 practices from there, I'm going to literally count as I go along with you. So that Friday was the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Like 11 would have been the joint practice with the Dolphins of like days of open practice. And there might have been a couple closed practices in there. But essentially like they just got through the installs a little bit before the first preseason game against the Dolphins. So that means like they didn't start kind of really going back over stuff and narrowing it down and like mastering any of the individual things until right before that first Dolphins preseason game. And so that then gave Caleb Williams now another full week of like, all right, now we're only doing stuff that you've done before. We're done with the brand new stuff. Now we're going to go back and, hey, remember those plays we ran on that first day of practice? Let's go back to those again and refine them and tweak them. But now you've seen them before. Now you've practiced them before. Now you've had a couple of practices with them. And the same is true with every other play that they kind of go back through for another week. Right? They're not doing 12 days worth of it because not everything on those 12 days are they going to repeat. Some of that stuff was weeding out what you want to do and don't want to do. So now you take off the stuff you don't want to do and just start really practicing and refining the stuff you do want to do. And so, of course, like he was struggling when they were throwing brand new stuff at him over and over again and trying to figure out, yeah, the offense is going to be a little bit disjointed when everyone's doing it for the first or second time. But now that you can take all the plays that you thought fit well and do them for the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th time, all of a sudden it becomes a lot more comfortable. And he can go out in a preseason game against the Bills and execute passing plays on time, on target, in rhythm, great footwork, great release. And like that's how you get the kind of performance that we got this way. And so like it just feels like this was the payoff of what had been building up the whole time. And I think it reminds us that a lot of the consternation about, oh no, is the Bears offense struggling or whatever, it was always building towards this, right? It's making those mistakes to learn and grow. And yes, they do still have to actually learn from it and actually grow from it. But like that's what we saw against the Bills. It's like, oh, yep, that paid off. That worked exactly the way Ben Johnson had structured it. And that's like a huge box being checked and a great proof of concept of like, yep, this system of how they're teaching it to the quarterback and developing the quarterback seems to be working as planned so far. And that's a really, really encouraging thing. And that's why it looks so encouraging against the Buffalo Bills. It's why I don't think the Bears starters need to play in the third preseason game against the Kansas City Chiefs. But Ben Johnson's leaving the door open. And depending on how you want to interpret his comments on it, it's easy. You can read it one way and say, oh, he's saying they're not going to play. And you can read it another way saying, oh, he's saying they might need to play a little bit. So we'll hear what Ben Johnson said and try and figure out what the plan might be for the Bears starters on Friday night next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. And coming up August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day. It's a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. Because on August 26th, for just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you special deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, you're eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. There'll be deals on Ben Johnson to win NFL Coach of the Year, for example, or maybe even a Caleb Williams long shot MVP odds, whatever you want to get involved with. August 26th is that FanDuel Futures Day. So visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only, August 26th with FanDuel. Play your game. Caleb Williams and the Bears offensive starters showed me everything I wanted to see against the Bills to say, yep, I'm good. I don't need to see them against the Kansas City Chiefs. Defensive players, the starters were on the field for 3 plays. And I'm not sure that they showed me anything, but I also don't necessarily feel like I need to see them against the Kansas City Chiefs. But Ben Johnson is leaving the door open in a way that I at first thought, oh, there's no way they're playing. And now I'm coming around on maybe he might play him a little bit, but it's really a semantics thing. It's like, it feels like national treasure here. Like we're trying to like read between the lines on what exactly Ben Johnson said here to try and figure out which way he might be leaning, because there's no joint practice with the Kansas City Chiefs because it's a quick turnaround, right? Playing Sunday night to then playing Friday night. It's just a quick, sort of 4 full days in between. Not a lot of practice time built in there in the schedule. I mean, they'll practice on Wednesday before. That's an open, I guess that's a private practice, but it's, they'll have some days off in between there, so there's not a lot of time to prep. So you would think like short week, 3rd preseason game, no need to play the starters. Last preseason game is always backups anyway, right? But then Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs says, no, we're going to play some of our starters. Now the Chiefs played on Friday last week as well, so they have a full week to prepare. So they don't have the short week turnaround that the Bears do, and that's a different factor for them. But still, it's like, okay, well, it's not that every team is playing backups. And if the Bears are facing some starters on the other side, then wouldn't it be nice to get your starters some run against their starters? But for Ben Johnson, it sounds like it's a little bit less about like, do we need to see the guys on the field, and more about like, is it valuable for them to just like go through everything of getting ready and taking the field now on a road game for the first time this preseason. So pay close attention to what Ben Johnson says, especially at the end here, and see what you think. Does this sound like a guy who's going to play his starters or not going to play his starters?
We'll go into more of your calculus about what to do in Kansas City with the starters.
We'll talk about it as a staff one more time, and once again, we take into account the number of reps they're having here. I know we're going to have a good padded practice on Wednesday. We need one more of those, and then we'll kind of see with what we need to see. I thought a big part of what tonight was about was getting our routine down for a home night game, which is week 1 for us. And so I thought our starters did a great job. They understood what the purpose was. They came out and got the job done, did what they needed to do, and then we got them out of the game. But I thought the routine was a big part of it, and this will be really the first time we're on the road here in the preseason, so it's probably good to go through that exercise as well.
So I think the first time that I listened to that clip, and if you want to, you can rewind and listen to it a second time if you want to see if you pick it up any differently. The first time I listened to that clip, it was like, oh, I think Ben Johnson's going to play his starters. Like he said, there was a real value to them kind of getting ready and playing a home game at night, just like week 1. Like that makes a lot of sense. That seems smart. And now he's like, well, it'd be nice to kind of go through that same thing for a road game. So it sounds like, well, you're going to play this one then on the road to practice the road game, right? And well, I certainly think that's still an open possibility. I think when I listened back again a second time, right, like he talked about everything but the playing on the field. He said like it would be valuable for them to travel and be in the hotel and get ready for a night game on the road. But like, do they need to play then? I think he's right that it would be valuable for them to kind of pretend as though they're preparing for a road game. But like, as soon as the opening kickoff starts, why even bother put the starters out there? Like, you can have the starters warm up and pretend like they're going to go. Like, really kind of treat it like a full road game as though they were going to start. But then what's the difference if Caleb Williams is actually under center for the first snap or not? He will still have gone through the entire multi-day process leading up to that moment. But like the actual snaps he plays on the field on the road versus at home shouldn't be that different. I mean, it's a preseason environment. It's not like even going to be like a hostile, loud crowd under the lights. Like I just don't think. Like I think the value for the starters drops off the moment you kick off the ball. Like everything else I get, like let's run through what it's like to go into a road game just with this coaching staff and this team and everything, just to kind of dress rehearsal that. But the actual on-field aspect of it isn't any different on the road than it is at home. There's no additional value to playing in the Chiefs game that you didn't get from playing in the Bills game, other than you'd face some starters instead of some backups that you got against the Buffalo Bills. But like for me, given that it's a short week, and given that Caleb Williams on the offense played so well, like what there's not more I need to see on the actual field from this group. So I don't like the idea of putting them out there and risking injury. I mean, we just watched on Monday Night Football, not an injury, but just like Joe Burrow was running for his life with the Bengals starters when their offensive line was falling apart. And of course, we trust the Bears offensive line more than that, and that presumably Caleb wouldn't be in that situation. But anytime you watch a starting quarterback in any kind of risk in a preseason game, you go, I don't want my guy doing that. Like, it'd be different if the offense struggled last week and there were still some real questions and you just want another couple of drives to work out some of the kinks and make sure you get everybody on the same page. That would be a different conversation. And of course, like realistically, injury chances pretty low. You know, they'll be pretty safe. They'll have Caleb throw the ball away if he's under pressure right there. I mean, and they're not even going to play guys like Joe Tooney or DeAndre Swift anyway. You know what I mean? So it's like, realistically, the risk might not be that high, but the reward doesn't feel very high for me either. Like, I don't think there's a lot to gain by getting another drive with the starters out there. I mean, whether they play on this Friday or not, there's still going to be another 2 weeks before a regular season game. So I don't know that 2 weeks versus 3 weeks is going to create so much more rust. Like, I'd get if you hadn't played at all in the preseason, maybe getting them a little bit of action in this game, but because they played against the Bills, like there's just, again, Ben Johnson deserves the benefit of the doubt and the understanding that he knows this team better than we do, and we should kind of, until he loses that trust him to make the right decision. So I'm not going to like crap on it and tell him he's wrong if that's what he decides. But I also listened to that quote. I'm not positive he actually means play. You know, he just said it's valuable to go through all the other stuff. So we'll see how that actually ends up working here. If the starters do play, it's going to be very, very little. I mean, one drive, get him out of there. Feels like the absolute maximum we could see against the Chiefs. But otherwise, this is the game where guys make the 53-man roster. Those final guys fighting for that spot, fighting for their practice squad futures and all that stuff. That's what this is all about. And maybe it'll be one last opportunity in the left tackle battle where I've been very early on this podcast to call Braxton Jones as your starting left tackle. The Bears continue to insist it's open and undecided, but Ben Johnson dropped a little nugget after the Bills game that makes me wonder if they might not declare a starting left tackle this week before we even get to the Kansas City Chiefs game. And maybe they might not even publicly announce it. They're not going to put out, I don't know if they're going to put out a press release that says, hey, Braxton Jones is our left tackle. But I'm thinking the Bears will have decided on their left tackle before we even get to this Kansas City Chiefs game. And then it's a question of practice squad versus 53-man roster for everyone else. So I want to kind of check in on what the Bills game showed us and what Ben Johnson said about the Bills game and what they still want to see from Braxton Jones in particular next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Gametime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family, or maybe a concert the day of? You find out a band's in town and you want to go there, and suddenly you realize you just want to be in the stands? Well, that's exactly where Gametime comes in, because it's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. I've got the Gametime app on my phone, and I use it all the time. I've got tickets to see My Chemical Romance coming up at Soldier Field at the end of the month. I got my tickets there on Gametime, but I've used Gametime for Bears tickets, baseball tickets, basketball tickets, and so much more. They make the ticket buying process fast and simple. And prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to the first pitch or the opening song of the show. And they've got incredible last-minute deals with clear seat views and a lowest price guarantee that takes all the worry away. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem that code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So we'll see whether or not the starters play in this third preseason game and whether or not a specific left tackle is designated as a part of those starters by then, or if we still see all of the Bears tackles get some run, even if it's all backups in this Chiefs game. But I just get the feeling that regardless of whether or not they still want to see more from Braxton Jones in this game, that they will have internally decided formally that he is their starting left tackle. Again, on this podcast, I declared this battle over even before the Bills preseason game, that like an election, kind of projecting a winner before the votes have been fully tallied because of how they've handled Ozzie Trapillo and Theo Bennett and Braxton Jones throughout this whole process. And I think Ben Johnson, I'm not going to say he confirmed that because no, he did not. But the way he talked about their approach to the left tackle battle and the Bills game in particular tells me like this game this past Sunday was kind of what is going to end up sealing it for them. So like the important caveat here is like Ben Johnson was asked left tackle battle, like what did you see in the game? And he's like, well, and you'll hear this part. He's like from the sidelines, I couldn't really tell. So like Ben Johnson hasn't, at least in the clip you'll hear now, he hadn't had a chance to really watch the tape yet to give an evaluation on which tackle and how the tackles had performed. But he did tell us that this Bills game was going to be really, really important for that final decision, and I think the game then speaks for itself. So first, here's how Ben Johnson describes the left tackle situation, and then the follow-up question in here is like, what specifically you want to keep seeing from Braxton Jones?
I think this game is going to go a long way, and I would be remiss to say I could really tell from the sideline view. We're going to have to look at that tape to know for sure, but we kind of came into this game saying that this was going to be a big one for that eval.
And when you look at that tape, what do you want to see from Braxton?
To me, it's consistency. He's shown flashes of his old self, and yet there's still been some low moments where I know we're going to get beat in this league. You do. You know, when you're playing tackle against some of these pass rushers in this league, you're going to lose a rep or two. The biggest thing, well, there's two things. One is, how do you bounce back when that happens? And the other one is, how do we slow down from losing too fast? You know, if we're going to lose, we want to lose slow. And so, we'll see what it looked like here tonight, but I certainly didn't. I felt like we had good protection throughout. There were times we were running the ball, and you can kind of feel that as you're calling the game to stay on schedule there. So we'll see what that looks like.
A couple things stand out for me from that then. It's like, okay, this Bills game was going to be a big part of the evaluation of this left tackle battle. I didn't think Braxton Jones was great by any means, but he wasn't bad. You know, he got beat a couple times here and there in pass protection. As he said, like, you're always going to get beat sometimes, but like generally more or less got the job done. I thought Theo Bennett also played pretty well. It wasn't like, you know, one was worlds better than the other, but like the thing I'm stuck on with this quote is like, if the Bills game was going to be a big deciding factor in this left tackle battle and Braxton Jones took all of the starting snaps, and then Braxton Jones and the starters come out, and then Theo Bennett gets a bunch of the second team left tackle snaps, and obviously didn't get any starting left tackle snaps in this game. If this game was going to be, and I should add to that too, Ozzie Trapillo only plays right tackle in this game, so like not even really a part of the left tackle battle at this point in that process. So if you got two players competing for the starting left tackle spot at this point, Braxton Jones and Theo Bennett. And Theo Bennett only played with backups against backups. I don't see it as possible that you could leave that Bills game and say, yeah, that guy that only played backups all preseason, he's the starter. And the guy who played the starters, he's the backup. Like that just to me, like all signs point to, and have for some time now, pointed to Braxton Jones being the starting left tackle. Like if this game was going to be such a big evaluative tool to potentially fulfill Theo Benedict's long shot odds to be the starting left tackle, he would have needed to do it against starters. He would have needed an opportunity to do it in the starting offense. I realize like the Bills didn't have their starters out there, so it's not so much about the opponent as it is like where in the depth chart these guys were. But it was very clearly in both preseason games, it's been very clearly Braxton Jones is the number one left tackle, and then Trapillo or Theo Benedict is very clearly behind them. And the fact that neither or any of the backup offensive tackles has fully surpassed or gotten any preseason game first team reps in either of these preseason games tells you Braxton Jones is and will be your starting offensive tackle. And especially when you hear Ben Johnson say, like, we've seen flashes of the Braxton Jones of old, that's really all they've been looking for here, right? This whole left tackle battle has just been 100% Braxton Jones is coming off of an injury, and we just need to see him play like he played before he's injured, and then he's your starting left tackle. Like Trapillo and Benedict and Karana Magaji have gotten left tackle snaps in case Braxton Jones never got back and never fully recovered from the injury and just lost a clear step or something because of the injury and the time he had lost from that. Like that's what the left tackle competition was. It's like pushing Braxton Jones to make sure you're getting the best version of him coming off the injury. But like even Jones has said, like he's getting closer and closer to 100% and comfortable. And like that's all the Bears have been looking for and waiting for. So like Braxton Jones is your week one starting left tackle. I expect the Bears will make that decision formally this week. Whether they'll announce it or not, we'll see. Whether Braxton Jones plays at all against the Chiefs, we'll see. But when they take on the Minnesota Vikings on Monday Night Football, Braxton Jones will be the left tackle out there and shall remain there unless he gets hurt at some point this season. And then it gets interesting. Does Trapillo pop in? Does Theo Benedict come off the practice squad and do that? We'll see. Braxton Jones has been hurt the last 2 seasons. He needs a healthy year to really cash in on a big contract this upcoming offseason. That's not going to be from the Chicago Bears. And I think the tinfoil hat hot take theory right now is that in 2026, I'm just going to plant this seed now, that next season, 2026, perhaps Darnell Wright is your left tackle and Ozzie Trapillo is your right tackle next season. That's early signs, but that to me feels like what the future might be, that they might give up on the whole Ozzie Trapillo at right tackle thing and finally do the Darnell Wright to left tackle thing, and we'll see. It'll be a whole nother off-season storyline to watch next year. That's a long way away. We still have the rest of the preseason to get through, a whole regular season, and so much more to break down right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if you're looking for a second listen today, go check out the Locked On NFL podcast for more football talk. Today, I co-hosted the Tuesday. I co-host every Tuesday morning with Tyler Rowland on Locked On NFL. Podcast comes out twice a day, 5 days a week. But on this morning's podcast, as it comes out, he and I talked about Trey Hendrickson trade destinations, including the Green Bay Packers or Detroit Lions. We talked about quarterback decisions in Cleveland, naming Joe Flacco the starter, and somebody else named a starting quarterback, and I can't remember who the second team was. But then we talked about the Colts and the Saints quarterbacks in the third segment. But the other team that named a starting quarterback is going to bother me a little bit. Nonetheless, more football talk on Locked On NFL, so go check that out. Come back tomorrow, make Locked On Bears your first listen once again for another opportunity to bear down.